One.
My name's Bob Darrell, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Bob.
Would you indulge me with a moment of silence while I open with a prayer? Lord, help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, everything I think I know about myself, everything I think I know about others, and everything I think I know about my own recovery, all for a new experience in you, Lord, a new experience in myself, a new experience in my fellows, and a much-needed new experience in my own recovery. Amen.
Amen.
Ask It basket right here. If you have any questions, write them down, and we will address them later on today, about the second, right after dinner. There's that prayer, the set-aside prayer, is a deviation, a fleshed-out deviation of a very simple prayer that was used by one of my mentors and also one of Scott's, a guy named Don Pritz, who passed away about a year ago, lived in Colorado, a man who carried a tremendous message through an era when the big book was lost within the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was one of a half dozen men who kept it alive in the United States. When people were trying to figure out the steps from treatment center guides and the 12 by 12, and he was one of the gentlemen that kept the big book alive. And that prayer is very important to me because the thing that I've discovered, the biggest baggage that I can carry into today is all the other stuff I thought worked once before. That I need to have an open mind, because without an open mind, it's hard to have an open spirit. There's an old Chinese proverb, a Buddhist proverb, about the wisdom to know the most important thing you would ever know. And it's a story of this little old wise Chinese farmer who lives on this meager piece of ground that he doesn't even own. It's owned by this Lord, and the Lord allows him to live there and work hard in the fields, and he must tithe a certain portion of his crop to the Lord for the privilege of working the fields. And he lives there with his only son, and they own one thing, and it's their only possession, and it's a horse. And one day, the horse runs off. And this is literally, he loses everything he owns in that running off of that horse. And his friends and neighbors and family come running over to console him, to tell him how terrible this is, that he lost everything he owned. And the little old man just shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know if it's awful. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. And they just look at him like, you don't even think that's bad? You've lost everything you owned? And he just goes, I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. A couple days later, the horse returns right into his corral, leading a whole herd of wild horses. And now he's the richest man in the valley. And now his friends and family and neighbors come over to celebrate, to congratulate him, to tell him, this is wonderful, this is great, this is good, you're the richest man in the valley. And he just shrugs his shoulders and says, I don't know if it's good. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. He has a little bit of a Yiddish accent, you know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, who knows. A couple days later, his only son is trying to break one of the wild horses, and he's thrown, and his leg is all mangled up, and he can't work, and he can't walk. And now his friends and family and neighbors come running over to console him, to tell him how terrible this is. This is bad. This is awful. And he shrugs his shoulders and says, I don't know if it's awful. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Who knows? And they just shake their heads, and they think, that's your only son. You don't even think that's bad? And he just said, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. A few days later, the Chinese army marched through the valley, and they forced all the young men to go and fight in a battle where none of them would survive, and they couldn't take the son because of his broken leg. You see, the little old man knew the most important thing he would ever know is that he doesn't know. Isn't it the things that I think my ego tells me are so that have sabotaged me over my life? The worst thing I would have bet could have ever happened to me would be for me to end up an alcoholic and end up in Alcoholics Anonymous and end up having to surrender and end up having to work these steps. And yet, years later, I can tell you with absolute certainty that I didn't know, that it turned out to be the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I have been so wrong about so much in my life. And if you have the type of ego that you can't stand to be wrong, you're going to have a hard time in recovery. I'm telling you, it's not going to be good if you can't stand to be wrong. Because we're going to enter into a process right now. We're going to start looking at the exact nature of our wrongs. We're going to start looking to see how wrong I had been about every judgment I've ever had. Scott?
Thanks, Bob. I was put in mind of a couple of the old sage sayings that I love. The first one is the first rule of holes. When you're in one, stop digging. That's hard for us. And the other one, very similar to it, is the first rule of cavalry. And that's when the horse is dead, dismount. I go to the whip. You know, I just... Continuing on page 63. With the prayer in the second paragraph, God, offer myself to thee. It doesn't say, give me a little help and I'll take it from here. It says, take me. I'm literally inviting God in to take over my life, to build with me. We may have to tear down some of what's already standing there. And I think we do newcomers a great disservice if we don't tell them this. You come here and do this thing we're doing, your life's going to change, and you are not going to like all of the changes. And I think you need to know that. Some things you'd like to keep are probably leaving, and they are not coming back. And some things that you don't like are coming, and they're going to stay. But it's a package deal. Look at 2 bowling balls here. My will, God's will, pick one. That's what I'm being asked to do here. The fact is that this package is dramatically better than the life that I had before. And yet there's still on some days parts of it that I don't like. Isn't that insane? That what I like doesn't really matter that much if I'll stop and think about it. I've been hearing people for years say, it's important for me to be comfortable today. I don't believe that. What's important is that I don't borrow discomfort from any other day. I live only in this day. We talk a lot about one day at a time. Continuing with the prayer. To do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage. The word bondage means the exact same thing as slavery. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. And then the balance of the prayer talks about me helping other people. I think there are about 30 references in the big book to me helping other people. That's what this is about. And then it says we thought well before taking this step. And when I get a new man to this point, I say, I want you to think about this. Let's don't leap at this. Give this some thought. Because we're not messing around here. You're going to have major life changes. I want you to make sure you understand that you invited them in. And then it suggests in the next paragraph that we do it with someone. And I'm more than happy for them to do their third step prayer with anyone they like and me. Because I want to be there. Because it has been my experience, generally speaking, somewhere between the beginning of this work on step 3 and the end of step 9, there tends to be a big experience. And sometimes we see it, it's metamorphosis. It's right there. It's from the cocoon to the butterfly. Other times it's a process. But if it happens here at this third step prayer, and it can, I have seen it, someone who knows what's going on needs to be there. I have had men unable to get up off their knees from the third step prayer. They need someone there who knows what's going on. And so I'm more than happy for them to invite someone else. But I want to be there. And that's just what I do. I'm not saying you should. That's what I do. And then it gives you the invitation to write your own third step prayer. And also in that last paragraph. And I invite them to. And I want to tell you this too. Bob and I have talked about this. We both have permission. If you hear us tell a story about someone we know or someone we sponsor, we have that person's permission to tell you that story, or we would not be telling it. So go to the bank with that. All right, we have permission. And so I have permission to tell you this one. I sponsor a songwriter. You can't live in Nashville and have 20 years and not sponsor a songwriter. It's one of the rules. I actually sponsor more than one. But this particular one, when he got to this point, I said, you're invited here to write your own third step prayer if you'd like to. And he said, oh, I'll do that. So he he came and I said, I want to read it before we get it. So I read this beautiful thing that he had written, but it left out the part about God being in charge and that being okay with him. So I think it's kind of important that we check the details on these things. I have seen some beautiful ones. I wish I had a copy of Burke Harlan's. He wrote a magnificent third step prayer. I'd love to see a copy of that again. But we got to make sure that we express the whole idea. And then we pray the prayer. And I like to tell them as we finish the prayer that the discussion rages in our fellowship as to when to do a four-step. And I've heard people say, don't do a four-step too soon, you may drink. I've personally never seen that. I've seen several thousand wait too late. Because if you haven't done one, I'm referring, by the way, when I say the four-step is to the actual four-step, which is cleverly concealed in this book, which is news in a lot of places. And what the four-step does is it brings tremendous relief. It contains the forgiveness process, which is what we're going to talk about, hopefully this hour. But this thing about don't do a four-step too soon. I've heard people say you do one step a year. What page is that on? I can't seem to find that. You wouldn't want to get well too fast, would you? Yeah, I was always afraid I might overcorrect. I might do just a little bit more than I absolutely had to. I think that's what that thinking is about. The book is not specific about when to do a four-step. It actually makes 2 time references. And I believe that I should give any leeway that the book gives. And if the book makes 2 time references, if I sponsor you, you may use either of those 2 or anything that lies between them. Does that seem fair to everyone here? So that's the approach we take. And I have him begin reading at the bottom of page 63 after we finish the prayer. He says, next. I say, wait, that's a time reference. So that would be next, would be as we come up off of our knees, having done the third step prayer. Next. That's a time reference. We launched out on a course of vigorous action. First step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Our decision, that would be our third step decision, was a vital. The word vital comes from the Latin vita, which means life. Vital means necessary to life. Was a vital and crucial step and it could have little permanent effect unless at once. That's a time reference. So, if I sponsor you, you'll do your 4-step next, or at once, or anywhere in between. I give you all of the leeway that the book gives you. I think it's only fair. And it's going to get worse than that. Believe me, it's going to get worse than that. Followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of. Isn't that interesting? Be rid of. In step 4, I'm going to be rid of the things in myself that have been blocking me. And I would observe that if you do a 4-step and all you do is write, you will be rid of ink, paper, and time. And I'd be surprised to find out that ink, paper, or time were blocking you. And yet in step 4, we're going to be rid of the things that are blocking me. So there must be things in step 4 other than writing. And I would observe that it is the things other than writing in step 4 that are life-changing. We're going to cover that in this hour and the next one.
Blocking is from what? 3 things. Page 55. The great reality deep down within us, the book says that we're blocked from it. We're obscured from it. The fundamental idea of God deep within us, we're blocked from it. I'm also blocked from carrying out the decision in step 3. If you may have the same experience that I had in early sobriety. I'd get down on my knees, I'd say the third step prayer. 20 minutes later, I'm in my head running the show. And I used to think, well, I'm turning it over and taking it back. No, I'm not turning it over because I'm blocked from carrying out the decision in step 3. I can't do it. I am still in the bondage of self because I have not dismantled the judgment machine that is my will that I will dismantle in step 4. So I'm blocked from carrying out the decision in step 3. And I'm also blocked in something I don't even want to admit. I'm blocked from any kind of connectedness or community or intimacy with others. And I don't know that I'm blocked from you because I think it's your fault. It's not that I don't want to be close to you. You're just a jerk. And eventually so are you and you and you. And it start getting lonelier and lonelier and lonelier. And alcoholics live in a peculiar state of isolation through our judgment. We're blocked from God, from carrying out the decision in step 3, and from other people. And don't even know it. Alcoholism is a lonely business.
Thanks. Continuing on page 64, therefore we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. The businesses that I deal with, most of them do a computer update every night. For me, that's the evening portion of step 11 as described on page 86. But once a year, sometimes twice, but at least once a year, they do a full tear-down inventory. So this is the reference. Now, I have some friends who say you do the first 9 steps once and you stay sober on 10, 11, and 12. And if that's what their sponsor has them doing, it suits me fine. My own experience is that on my 8th, 4th step, I discovered resentments that were over 25 years old. And I had been thorough before that. I just couldn't find them until then. So for me, about once a year, and in 23 years of sobriety, I believe I've just completed my 18th 4th step. So I've missed some. But my last one only took me about 30 minutes because I stay pretty cleaned out. But I think it's important for me to stay involved in the process because every once in a while I find something, particularly in the States as we come up on election year, some of the old resentments do come back. I'm sure that doesn't happen here. Okay, continuing on 64, take a commercial inventory as a fact-finding and fact-facing process, an effort to discover the truth about the stock and trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods to get rid of. Twice on this page, we have told you in step 4 we're going to get rid of, promptly and without regret. Next paragraph, we did exactly the same thing with our lives, took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. There's the good news one more time. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. So here is an overview of step 4 as I understand it from this text. And by the way, if you disagree with something I say, I'd love to hear from you. That's how I learn. I make mistakes. I wonder what I know for sure today that's incorrect. So I'm on a constant search for people that disagree, not to argue with or to sell you mine, but to see what I might learn. So please, I feel free.
And I'd like to reiterate that if I say something you disagree with, I'd also like you to see Scott.
Yes, Bob's starting a new group called the Knights of Humility. I think. Anyway, and so as I look at step 4 in here, this is what I see. That the 3 functions of self, the 3 manifestations of self that we're going to inventory, very specifically are resentment, fear, and sexual misconduct. And I claim there's not a sex inventory in the book. We inventory only the dark side. I don't find the direction here that says, what did you do in the sexual arena that you thought was right and good? So we only inventory the dark side of it. I do not like the idea of sex having a bad name. It's my favorite toy. And, right? And so I don't like the idea of it having a bad name. So, and then the format that we use is we will do a series of lists, observations, and prayers on resentment, fear, and sexual misconduct. So that's what the setup looks like on this thing. It is my experience that the writing portion of step 4 has very little, if any, effect at all. The observations, not what you happen to notice as you went zipping through writing, but the observations specifically called for, some written, most not. And the prayers are life-changing. That's where the poison is dug out of your soul. I heard a speaker one time say, resentment is when I didn't get my will in the past. Anger and depression are when I'm not getting my will right now. And fear is the concern that I may not get my will sometime in the future. So this whole thing is about my will and what it's carried to me. From my home group, God forgives me for everything I ever did, and He loved me while I was doing it. My God got bigger the day that guy said that. The rest of my experience is that I don't have the power to make a mistake so ugly that God can't turn it into something magnificent. And I didn't say fix. I don't have the power. That's who I am. That's who He is. Those things help me so much. So what we're going to do now is we're going to explore for directions. And people ask me occasionally, what do you think about writing an autobiography? And I think it's a great idea. I hope you will write an autobiography. But I also hope you'll do a 4-step, because that will change your life. Because the 4-step is not an autobiography. Not at all. Next paragraph. Resentment is the number 1 offender. It destroys. I love the language. It destroys. My alcoholics and anything else from it stem all forms of spiritual disease. We've been not only mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Bob already talked about that, how important that is. It says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. For me, that's a general description. They're going to tell me exactly how to set them on paper. It says, we listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. So what I need first direction, is a list of people, institutions, or principles, that is to say anything or anyone that has ever made me angry. And if you're thinking, wow, that's going to be a long list, good. Then you're going to do a thorough fourth step. My first one was pretty long. I want to talk a little bit. I want to have some fun first. Probably I say to this guy at this point, now you're probably wondering what color ink to use or what color paper. Were you wondering that? About half of them say yeah. Page 67, 2/3 of the way down the page. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. That's not very specific. It does not say white paper, black ink. That could easily be black paper and white ink. And if I sponsor you, it'll be one or the other. And black pencil, by the way, and white paper is close enough. But I want, I want you, I think that's crazy. I think that's absolutely insane and stupid. And I'd insist on it. Because the first time I let myself on the hook on a detail in here, it might have been the one that would have saved my life. So I think that's insane. And I fully expect the guys I sponsor to do their inventory in black and white. And if I could delete this part of my presentation, it would make Bob a lot happier. But I can't. So that's just what I do. He doesn't have that same perspective, and that's fine. I like to recommend a spiral notebook. I think that's a very easy way to do this. Just a simple little notebook. You open the inside cover, write something on the first page, something subtle like, this is my fourth step, put it down. If I find you with it, I will kill you and hide your body. Something subtle and yet that gets your point across. Don't leave them confused. And then if you'll turn the next page, you'll be looking at two facing pages. Consider that to be one page. And if you'll put a number 1 above the margin on the left-hand page, a number 2 in the center of the left-hand page, and a 3 and a 4 equidistant on the right-hand page. That's the way we lay it out. We're going to do a 4-column inventory. And what we need first is a list of people, institutions, or principles with whom we are angry. That's what that first column is going to be. If you have a 40-hour-a-week job and a 30-minute commute to work, that costs you 45 hours a week. If you sleep 8 hours a night, that's 56 hours a week. If you attend 7 meetings with a little driving time, a little hanging around, that's another 15 hours. 3 hours of recreation, maybe some tennis, a round of golf, something like that. 2 hours to mow the lawn and do your melon list. Do y'all do melon lists? Honey do this, honey do that. It's what we call that a melon list in the States. 5 hours reading spiritual literature. If I sponsor you, you'll read 2 pages a day in the big book. You can't read 2 pages a day in the text. I haven't got time to fool with you. 3 hours a week to bathe, shave, personal hygiene. 4 hours a week for a date with your wife, if you're fortunate to still have one, maybe to coach a little league soccer team or something like that. 5 hours on the week on the telephone with me and with some other men whose names and numbers I will give you. 12 hours a week cooking and eating. An hour shopping for groceries, getting haircuts, things like that. 5 hours a week in prayer and meditation. We're going to need some time on that. 9 hours a week watching television. That's 3 ball games or 2 games of golf on TV. That's enough. Add that up, it's 165 hours. There are only 168 hours in a week. You got 3 hours left. I want half. I believe that one of the principles here is that recovery should not have a negative impact on any other aspect of my life. It should be dadgum inconvenient at times. But it shouldn't have a negative impact on my marriage, my job, my relationship with my children. So let's don't take time away from those things. But let's talk about it. For me, the hour and a half is just a rule of thumb. I sponsor a man, and when we got to step 4, his wife had a fabulous job. They had a 1-year-old son. He was a stay-at-home dad. His son took a nap from 1 to 3 every afternoon. 5 days a week, I expect him to do 2 hours on his 4-step. From 1 in the afternoon to 3 while his son's asleep. And if there's a day when you can't, then tell me beforehand. What my experience is that I get reasons beforehand. I get excuses after. So get me with the reason on the front end. I'm easy. Whatever your reason is, good for me. I buy it. On the back end, they tend to be excuses. And the ones on the front end also have a tendency to be true. Anyway, and so another guy has got a wife and 5 kids and he's working 2 jobs. I don't think he can give an hour and a half. So I like to come up with something that we can agree to. I think when I set out to do my first 4-step, I gave myself the assignment of completing the 4-step. If I do that, I'm in perfect position to hate myself until it's done. And I think I hated myself long enough. If I can agree with my sponsor on how much time I should spend each week, and I spend that time on it, I can feel good about myself while I'm in process. Doesn't that feel better? It's a much easier way to approach it. I want them to schedule it. And Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is not a schedule. Monday from 7 p.m. till 7:30 p.m., that's a schedule. Call me every Sunday with your schedule. Now, and oh my goodness, I didn't know he had a Little League game Monday night, and so I slipped it from 7 o'clock Monday night to 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. I don't even need a phone call on that, right? But like anything else on my calendar that's important, it's not subject to cancellation. Subject to change, maybe a little bit. Not subject to cancellation. And then just do it in process. You know how to eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time, you know. One of these days that sucker's gone. So let's don't worry about how big the elephant is. Let's take today's bite. The one day at a time focus. That's what this is all about. I also like to tell them that if you have to do the perfect 4-step, you can't do one at all. You have my permission to do a poor 4-step. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly, as I learned to do it. Well, that was a new one for me. That you're not going to do this thing perfectly. We are not saving a special alcove in Akron at the AA Hall of Fame for your 4-step. All right? And our home group does not give a trophy every year for the best 4-step. This is the trophy you are not going to get. If you can't read it in the back, it says 4-step trophy, never awarded. All right? This is the trophy you are not getting. You can have your picture made with us later if you'd like to. I'll leave it right up here. But just not yours. You're not getting it. The other thing that I do is as soon as he starts it, I get a hold of his 4-step and I give him his grade and the inside cover under that stuff about please put it down, F-, right? Because you're going to have to do this again. So if it doesn't have to be perfect, then you can actually do it. In the 30-minute session, and I just recently got a fellow all the way through the work, and he's an early riser and had a lot of time on his hands in the morning. He was doing 45 minutes in the morning 4 days a week. That's what he and I agreed to. Something came up and he had to drop that down to 2 days a week for a couple of days. Great. We talk about it on the front end. So there's a lot of flexibility. But I like the first 5 minutes of that to be in prayer and meditation. Let's invite God into this 4-step. Let's ask him for clarity of mind to find what I need to find and the courage to write it down. About 5 minutes. And then let's sit down and just start spitting them. Inside cover, turn the page. We're looking at a double page, 1, 2, 3, 4 across the top. We're going to work in the left-hand margin, and we need the names of all the people and things that have ever made you angry. Ever. Even if you're sure you've already forgiven them. The rule is that when in doubt, write it out. Let's get it down. Write a name, skip a line, write a name, skip a line, write a name, skip a line. For those of you who have looked ahead and realized that column 2 is going to be what they did, and you're planning to save 10 pages for your father and 9 for your boss, the answer is write one name, skip one line. Write one name, skip one line. Do not write any other name. Don't write any names a second time. Now, you may do that by mistake. We'll find it later. We're not going to take all that extra time for writing all that stuff, and I'll show you why in just a minute. When you get to the bottom of the page, turn the page and write 1, 2, 3, 4 and continue. And do that until they slow down. If you can sit for 30, 45 seconds and not think of anything or anyone that has ever made you angry, then let's take a look at the bottom of page 65. First sentence below the example, it says, we went back through our lives. So that indicates that we use what I call a reverse chronology. We begin with today and work backward through our lives. I currently live at this place. I'm married to this fabulous woman who's doing the workshop down the hall. This is where I work. This is my home group, et cetera, et cetera. But 15 years ago, I was married to, and I worked at the other place and so on. And then before that, I lived in this other place and then before that. And I go back through my life thinking of everything that went on in those places, searching for anything that has ever made me angry. There should be some major political figures down there, local and international, major political parties. There's probably at least one religion listed there, maybe a branch of the military. Most of your teachers in schools, all of your family members, just put them down. Right? And just whatever you can think of. And people ask me sometimes what's a good size of a list. I think the shortest list I ever saw, I believe was complete, was around 45 or 50. It was a very young man who had a pretty good attitude. The longest list I ever saw was over 600. And it was incomplete. This guy hated everybody, and he wished there was more of them. I don't think I'd ever seen anyone as much in love with hate as this guy was. And so we're going to go back through your life. And when we get to your earliest memories, we are finished. Is the list complete? No, absolutely not. But it's as complete as we're going to get it this time. Because if I sponsor you sometime in about 6 months, you're going to be sponsoring somebody else. And when you take him through this work, you're going to go yourself. So we're going to pick up the other pieces later. The other thing I ask you to do is to carry writing materials with you all the time once we complete that first column. Because you're going to be in the grocery store looking at the cantaloupes. You say, oh, his head looked just like, just write it down. We'll add it to the list next time you get to it. So that list remains fluid. When you get to your earliest memory, we're moving on to direction 2, which is the next sentence. It says we asked ourselves why we were angry. Take a look at the example on the facing page. I'm resentful at Mr. Brown. The cause. Now listen to the words under the cause. His attention to my wife. Told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get my job at the office. Begin with the word office, if you would, and count backwards. Just the words under cause. Somebody give me a number. 19. It's easy to miss of and the, even if you go backwards. You go forward, you never get them all. 19 words. And let's talk about what he did. Mr. Brown is messing with his wife. Has told his wife about his girlfriend. I bet that made things pleasant at the house. And is trying to get him fired. He got 19 words. It's a summary. All right, we're not going to start out. It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon. No, we're not going there. It's a summary. It's brief. My second column says things like screwed me in a business deal. Left me for another guy. Next to high school football coach. Didn't play me as much as I deserved. Left me for another guy. Left me for another guy. There are patterns. If you'll look for them, you may see patterns. But it's a summary, and it's brief. And then I say to him, 19 words. If you've done the format we talked about, you've got the name in the left-hand margin, and you now have the space from the name over to the spiral, and you have the entire line below that, in which you can write 19 words or fewer. Don't write the 20th word. If you have someone that you think's done more than this, and you need to write the 20th word, call me, we'll negotiate. I'll be happy to talk about it. Now, I'll tell you, I've never given up the 20th word. I'm willing to talk about it. The truth is, I've never been called. You wouldn't call me, would you? No, not after that. No. So they squeeze it down because we're not going to feed this resentment. We're going to dig it out of here. That's what we're here to do, is we're here to dig it out. And one of the hardest things, if you've never done the four-step out of this book, having this information, the hardest thing for you is going to be when you write a name, you're going to write what they did. Don't do that. It said list. We need the list first. We're going to complete column 1 before we go to column 2. That will be hard because you're going to work. We write in English, and people who write in English like to work left to right, not top to bottom. It's not going to be easy, but I hope you'll do that. There are 2 reasons. The best one is the book says list, and lists go down the page. Think of your last grocery list. A series of words and phrases went down a page. Lists don't go across. The second reason is because if you work across the page, it will tend to make this resentment flare. And we're not trying to make it flare. We're trying to dig it out. Direction 3, top of 65. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our 5-part multiple choice? Self-esteem, security, ambitions, personal or sex relations. Some will only get 1. This is column 3. Some will have 2 or 3. Some may have all 5. Some you may not be able to figure out. Don't give yourself a brain hernia trying to figure this out by yourself. Hopefully you have a sponsor. And call your sponsor, and your sponsor will help you understand why it was self-esteem. Because it almost always is. On my first 15 inventories, Self-esteem got the most ink. The last three, it's been security. It was really funny to watch the change. Still working down the page. Now, you would assume that what comes after column 3 is column 4. What comes after column 3 is the part of this inventory that I think is life-changing. And what lies between the 3rd and 4th columns, in my experience, is some of the most metamorphic of all of the work that we do. This will dig the poison out of your soul. Bottom of 65. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. They're going to tell us how to consider it. This is some of those observations I was referring to. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. Now, probably you have been sitting on bar stools with some of the other great philosophers of our era looking at this exact thing for decades. So we don't need to give this one a lot of time. To conclude others were wrong as far as most of us ever got. And I have to look and say that that's the truth. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. It was remorse. Sometimes we were sore at ourselves. Well, move on to the next paragraph. It says, it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. That's an observation that they have made. And what I asked the men I sponsor, say, do you want what the people that wrote this book had? And what they had was long-term, productive, happy recovery. Is that what you're looking for? If it is, then I'd encourage you to commit that when we go through this book, if they say they wrote something, you will stop and write it. If they say they prayed something, you will stop and pray it. If they say they observed something, you will stop and endeavor to observe it. You may or may not be able to, but you will try to observe it. So here's an observation. It's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. Is that plain to you? Have you ever seen a life that was happy, joyous, free, and full of resentment? I never have. I think it's a pretty interesting point. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? Did you ever squander hours on resentment? Did you ever sit in class and hate them when you should have been listening? Did you ever lay awake at night planning their demise when you should have been sleeping? Is that sounding familiar? Did you squander hours that might have been worthwhile? Is this true for you? Okay. But with the alcoholic whose hope, now they're going to tell me what my hope is. The maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. Growth means that what I already have may be insufficient. That although it's good, my 2007 program might not be enough to keep me sober in 2008. I must stay in a growth mode. Maintenance, I believe, means two things. Maintenance means I cannot afford to lose anything I already have. In that sense, to maintain. It also means I must maintenance my spiritual experience in the same sense that I maintenance my vehicle. I keep the front end aligned. I have the right pressure in the tires. I change the oil. I wash it. I maintenance my spiritual experience through prayer and meditation, taking meetings into penal facilities and treatment centers, sponsoring guys, having a sponsor, letting people in traffic. That may not be a big thing around here. Boy, it sure is at my place. Being faithful to my wife, telling you the truth, trying to be a good father. I maintenance my spiritual experience in that way, reading spiritual literature. It says this business of resentment is infinitely grave. I love the language, infinitely grave. I think we just threatened your life. I think we're going to do it a lot on this page. That was one. We found that it is fatal. They're not playing here. I found the man who, I hadn't seen him in several years, and I ran into the man that took me through these steps the first time at a clubhouse in Nashville. And I said, I need to ask you a question. Do you remember? And I gave him a man's name. And his response was, if anyone you sponsor ever commits suicide, you'll always remember them. And I said, when I was sober 2 years, he was sober 2 years. We were within a month or two of the same sobriety date. We had the same home group where I saw him 5 or 8 times a week. We had the same sponsor, you. And 2 years sober, he drove home from a meeting one night and pulled his car in the garage and dropped the door and left it running, sober, and committed suicide. And I'm looking at this, and I'm sitting here with a 6-year chip in my pocket, and I can't see the difference between me and that guy's name was Bill. And I'm scared. What's the difference? And he said, Bill died of resentment. I could not get him to do a 4-step, and the resentments killed him. And I've thought about it. I've talked to other men that I knew in recovery from that era who knew him, and everyone agrees with that analysis. Every time you saw him, he could not wait to tell you what some SOB had just done to him. He was the perennial victim, and the victims don't get sober. And we're going to talk about here on the balance of this page and a couple of others, stepping out of the victim role. But I want you to know, when this book says we found it's fatal, I watched it. I've seen it more than once. We just threatened your life twice. Continuing. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. It doesn't say when having such feelings. I think I'm okay if I have resentments, if I'm not harboring them. We're going to talk about how to not harbor them. Harbor means to give a safe place to nurture. The insanity of alcohol returns. We drink again. With us, to drink is to die. We just killed you 3 times. If we were to live, this is only for the ones that want to live. Everyone else can take another break. We just threatened your life again. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. About the time this book was being written, a very creative man named Walt Disney sat his staff down around a table and came up with a concept for writing Mickey Mouse cartoons. And people would spit out ideas, and your idea would remind me of something, and I'd say something, remind him of something, and we'd build something. And Walt Disney labeled his process brainstorming. Has nothing to do with the word brainstorm as we find it here in the text. I have a dictionary at home from the 1930s, and I looked up brainstorm. And it says transient, violent mental outburst. We know that as rage. So this brainstorm, as we talk, has nothing to do with the creative process. We're referencing 2 kinds of anger, the grouch or the slow burn, and rage, the brainstorm. I hope that helped. It sure helped me to get that information. I love this next sentence. It is so thin. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men. Boy, that's thin. But for alcoholics, these things are, we just killed you again, poison. We turned back to the list for it held the key to the future. Does that mean if I don't find the key to the future, I don't have a future? Yes, that's precisely what that means. We just killed you a 6th time on this page. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Well, different from what? The last time we looked at this was actually at the bottom of the preceding page. The first thing apparent was that people in this world and its people were often quite wrong. That's the last time we've looked at the list. So now we need to prepare ourselves to look at it from an entirely different angle. And I thought the different angle was going to be, we're going to look for my part in it. Never says that. I think that's one of the most damaging misquotes in the book, or about the book. Clearly, we never look for my part in this thing. We're going to talk about that. It says we began to see that the world and its people really dominate us. Let's take a 30-minute session and look over this thing. We've got 3 columns written down. Let's have a look. How did this stuff dominate you? This particular instance right here where someone got you. Did you plan your life so you'd be around them as much as possible so if they made a mistake, you could make sure everyone else knew? Did you plan your life so you'd never be around them so they couldn't get you again? Did your father beat you down so far that at 64 years old you still have occasional trouble with authority figures? That's my story, by the way. Let's have a look at these things and see how this stuff dominated you. Let's spend about a session and just sort of look at it. This is a tremendous indictment of resentment. That's what this whole page is about. Continuing. In that state, the wrongdoings of others, fancied or real. Fancied? Does that mean some of this only happened inside my head? That's exactly what that means. Had the power to actually kill. We just killed you again. That was 7. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered. I think that's one of the most powerful observations in the book. Do you see that? Bill Wilson was a salesman by trade. That's what I am. I'll tell you this about a salesman. A good salesman will never, ever mention price until he has established value. We just killed you 7 times on this page. Is that enough value for you? I hope it is, because the price is high. The price is very high. Do you see that they must be mastered? Have we made our sale? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. Oh, you mean I can't just say I forgive you and it's all over? No, you can't. It says this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Our mentor, Don, describes spiritually sick as cut off from God. Cut off from God. I think that's really something. And to watch my hands, if you would. I have to realize that the people who wronged me were perhaps spiritually sick. When I realize it, it becomes real for me. It's what my wife calls heart knowledge. I can know something up here, but when I realize it, it becomes real on a very different level. Very different level. I'm not going to call on anybody. Please bring to your mind the 1 or 2 worst things you ever did. Everybody got one? Weren't you spiritually sick to have done that? Weren't you cut off from God when you did that? Had you been walking in the sunlight of the Spirit in conscious contact with this gentle, loving God that created the galaxies and the giraffe, could you have done that? Could you? No. No chance at all. Probably wouldn't have thought of it, would you? No. Were you spiritually sick when you did those things you did? Yeah. So perhaps these people who wronged you were spiritually sick when they did it. This is the beginning of the forgiveness process. And what I asked them to do with this piece is to pray the list once. To begin your 5-minute period talking to God about the 2 or 3 worst things you ever did and how you crave His forgiveness. There's a line in a prayer that we end most of our meetings in the States with, all the ones I go to. And the line says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I believe what that means exactly is, God, if I don't forgive them, don't you forgive me. My sponsor told me, he said, you got here wanting mercy for you and justice for everybody else. And the package is mercy for everybody or justice for everybody, and you are part of everybody and you get to choose. And I am not in a position to face justice. Not at all. I have therefore chosen mercy for everyone, including all those who've harmed me, for they were merely spiritually sick. So talk to God for 5 minutes about the worst things you did and how you crave for His forgiveness, and then begin to pray the list. First name on the list, Fred. God, help me grant that Fred was just spiritually sick and not an SOB. Second name on the list, Mary. God, please help me grant that Mary was not a bad or evil person. She was just spiritually sick when she did those things that harmed me. Let's pray that list one time. Didn't ask you to mean it. I asked you to do it. Top of page. This is some of the most powerful stuff we have. And please observe there's no writing involved here. Top of 67. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. A lot of stuff in that sense. Though we didn't like their symptom, it's the symptom of their spiritual sickness. And the symptom is whatever they did that left me with a resentment. The way they disturbed us is the resentment. And then the great truth, they, like ourselves, were sick too. And then here's a prayer. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Lists, observations, and prayers. I very prayerfully approached this because I had a mentor. Actually, most of my mentors got sober on the second edition, and what I'm about to do was not in that. But I also believe what's on page 164, God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Page 551. In what I refer to as the More Will Be Disclosed section of the book, the stories. In the story, Freedom from Bondage, lady's referring to a resentment against her mother. Last paragraph. One morning, however, I realized I had to get rid of it for my reprieve. If you look up a reprieve, by the way, it's a stay of execution. Right? There's another death threat. My reprieve was running out, and if I didn't get rid of it, I was going to get drunk, and I didn't want to get drunk anymore. And my prayers that morning, I asked God to point out to be some way to be free of this resentment during the day. A friend of mine brought me some magazines to take to a hospital group I was interested in. I looked through them. A banner across one featured an article by a prominent clergyman in which I caught the word resentment. Before I go on, I want to observe the sequence of events because I propose that it is a predictable sequence of events. She sees something about herself that needs work. I chose my words very carefully. Not something wrong with her. I don't think there's anything wrong with us. We're God's kids. We just got parts of us that could use some work. I like to think we're like faceted gemstones, like a diamond has a lot of different sides. Those are called facets. It doesn't matter that some of my facets are cut beautifully and well polished and that some are not even started. What matters is that I'm working on today's facet. That's what matters. And I don't believe, and like the gemstone, the diamond, there's nothing wrong with it. They're just some places that could use some work. And I think that's a better attitude for me than beating myself up. Item 1, she sees something about herself that needs work. Item 2, she prays about it. I'd like to add item 3, talk to a sponsor or spiritual advisor. And then item 4, she doesn't stay focused on her problem or what needs work. She got busy helping somebody else. And her answer fell out of the sky on her. And I'd like to tell you that I believe that's a predictable sequence of events. They will happen over and over and over again. See it, pray about it. Talk to a sponsor about it, and take a meeting into a jail. Come out, your answer's laying on the hood of the car. Watch for it. You'll see it. I love to watch for it in the men that I sponsor. Continuing on page 552, he said, in effect, If you have a resentment you want to be free of, that's an interesting caveat. Do you want to be free? Did we make our sale? If you will pray for the person or thing you resent, you'll be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you'll be free. For their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free. Even when you don't really want it for them and your prayers are only words and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyway. And it goes on to say that'll work in 2 weeks. You're starting out with 195 resentments. Probably ain't going to work in 2 weeks. She's down to 1. I wouldn't worry about that too much. You plan to live to be 190 anyway. We got plenty of time, right? And so I like to take that prayer and add it to the one here on page 67. And so it might look like this. And continuing to do these 30-minute or 45-minute sessions 3 or 4 times a week. Sit down, talk to God about the worst things I've ever done, how I crave His forgiveness. First name on the list, Fred. God, help me show Fred the same tolerance, pity, and patience that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. And I pray that his hair doesn't fall out, that he gets promoted at work, that he gets a new car, that his kids go to school on scholarship and don't give him any trouble, that his wife is a fabulous lover. I pray that his lawn grows lush and green, but it grows so slowly he only has to mow it once a year. That he has a big spiritual experience and he walks in the sunlight of the Spirit and is filled with your love. Pray all of that stuff. About like that. That's a pretty good example. And then I ask a simple question. Do you mean that or don't you? And that's not an essay question. That's a yes or no. You either mean it or you don't. If you don't mean it, go to the next name. Don't stay there. If you mean it, put a check mark in the margin and go to the next name. And when we get to the end of the list, we'll start again just with the ones that aren't checked. And it wouldn't be unusual to get all the way through the list a couple of times before you check the first one. This is my experience, and forgive me, I'm getting way off of what the text says, but this is my experience with it, and I think it's most appropriate because of that. I don't have the power to forgive. The English language has that wrong. You know, I was going to say I could give you the 4-step trophy. I can't. We don't give that, but I could give you this. But I can't forgive you. Forgive isn't something I do. It's something I receive. That to me, resentment is like ice around my heart. And the ice has the thickness, and I believe that thickness is based on the severity of the event and how much I have nurtured that resentment. And what I do here is I prayerfully hold the icy heart up to the sunlight of the Spirit. And sunlight will melt ice. Question of time, question of how thick it is, how close I can hold it, how long I can hold it. If I use both of these prayers on this one on 67, I'm asking God to help me show Him something. On the prayer in the back of the book, I'm praying for him. So I'm praying for both people involved here. And what happens eventually is that someone I just hated, I really hope that I have a great life. And I hope they have a big spiritual experience and all that great stuff happens for them. And at that point, I have forgiven them. And it's not that I did it, I received it. I hope I'm explaining that. I got here like this, locked up. And what you've taught me to do is to open to receive the gifts that have always been here. It's never been God's unwillingness to give. It's been my inability to receive. So when I forgive you, I have received the gift of not hating you anymore. And I want to tell that over and over again. Because if we've got something more important in here, I don't know what it is. The forgiveness process is so powerful. And I hold them there. And the last guy took about 3 months. And I really don't care how long this happened, or how long this takes. And we're confused about this acceptance thing, too. We are not asking you to approve of what they did. It's not unusual among us. A pretty good percentage of us were abused as children. If you were abused as a child, I want to tell you right now, what they did was wrong. You did not deserve it. That child did nothing to deserve for that to happen. And I'm sick about it. I'm so sad that that happened to you. And shame on them. That was not right. It's never going to be right. You need to know that. We're not asking, acceptance does not have to include approval. Acceptance is in here. Acceptance is when I stop fighting on a heart level something over which I have no power. I only get a certain amount of spiritual energy on any given day. And if I squander it on things over which I have no power, I will not have enough left for today's assignment. Acceptance is when I step out of the ring, when I stop fighting. So this forgiveness process does not include that you have to approve of what they did. I think that's very important. The next sentence for me describe, and I hold them there, and I really just don't care how long it takes. Really don't. And I want them to pray in the shower and drive in the car and whatever you think of these people. Throw in some prayers and do the whole thing. And it's a process. And sometimes it's very quick. 3 or 4 months, not unusual on this. Not at all. Next sentence gives me my marching orders from here on. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. We avoid retaliation. So that's what I do when somebody makes me mad now. Those are my instructions. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. Page 77. It's one of the ones they rewrote recently. 3rd line. They stuck something in that wasn't there. I swear, if it wasn't there in your book, don't be surprised. It says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. I thought for the longest time it said our real purpose was to be of maximum service, and that's not what it says. It's to fit myself to be of maximum service. How do I do that? I can't very well be of service to someone that I hate. And I have to be available. If that person shows up at the door here, I have to be available to him. I can't do that if I still hate him. This forgiveness thing is so powerful and so important. Continuing on 67. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people. At least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. What a promise. God's going to show me how to take a kindly and tolerant view toward everybody. What a gift. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs that others have done. How are you going to do that if you still hate them? You got somebody that you roundly hate. How are you going to put out of your mind what they did and deal with them some other way? I don't think it's possible. I think it's necessary to get that hate poison dug out of my soul before I can do that. I'll tell you, you'll feel different. People will ask you what happened. You go through this process, they will ask you what happened. It'll be visible. You will look younger. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Doesn't say looking for my part. Do that part thing, would you? You going to pick that?
I got a bunch of stuff to do.
I bet you do. Let me knock up. You know what? I think that's enough for me. Why don't you just take it from there? We go another 15 minutes to a break. And you can pick up there after the next one.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. I'm Bob, still an alcoholic. About 7 years ago, I had a guy who's sober 23 years come and ask me to sponsor him. He was an ex-Navy chief, kind of a blustery, tough guy. And he had heard 20-some years before in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, he got it, that resentment's something that's bad. It's deadly. You're not supposed to have resentment. So he never had one again. Damn it. By God, never had one again. And so I'm taking this guy through the steps. And we get through the 3rd step. And I said to him, I want you to make a list of your resentments. And he folds his arm, goes like this, real defended, guys. Uptight guy. I says, resentments? I don't have any resentments. Nothing bothered. I just let it go. That doesn't bother me. Well, you could watch this guy walk across a parking lot from 100 yards and know he's uptight about something. I mean, he's just wound up tight. And I said, you don't have any resentments? And he said, no resentments. I said, really? He said, yeah, really, I don't have any resentments. I said to him, okay, then we're going to do something different. I want you to make a list of people you feel smugly superior to. And he got this look on his face like, oh my God, is that going to be a long list? He knew that resentments were wrong. And so he deluded himself into believing that he didn't have any. And isn't that a game that we play in AA? Don't let anyone else catch you with your spiritual pants down, right? So what happens is you're a newcomer, and if you're anything like me, you're a newcomer and you realize you're not supposed to have resentments. Okay, I don't have any anymore. And that's not how you get free. That's how you build an ulcer. That's how you get sick inside. And we started the process. And if it wasn't for this process on page 66 and 67, I am absolutely convinced that in my 11th year of sobriety, I would have either drank again, committed suicide, or killed 2 people, and then I'd be sitting in prison right now. And thank God that when I was a little over 4 years sober, I went through this process, and in between 4 years and 11 years, I took a lot of guys through this. So I understood it. Because, I think sometimes you do all this stuff and you're not really sure why you're doing it. Because it doesn't seem like you really need it. I mean, it's good. But why am I doing this really? And you don't know that you're forging a weapon, that one day your very life is going to be depend upon it. That something's going to come at you, and if you don't have these certain principles in place, you're not going to have a chance. And when I was in my 11th year of sobriety, I'd been sober over 10 years, and I found I was married to a gal that I've been married to her for over 4 years. We had a little girl, the love of my life. I will see her in Barcelona on Sunday. She's now 19 years old. And we had some marriage problems. And I didn't understand what was going on. And she came to me one day and said, I wanted a divorce. And I realized there's a problem here, and I talked her out of it. And we started going to marriage counseling. And after being in marriage counseling for a little while, she said to me, I don't want to go to counseling anymore. I just want out. I live in Las Vegas. It's an unusual town. You can get divorced there so quickly. You haven't even paid the MasterCard bill on the divorce yet, and you're single 2 weeks. I mean, it's just like that. And we got divorced on a Thursday. The next day, Friday, my daughter and just ex-wife moved in with one of my sponsees, my favorite sponsee and my best friend. And I found out that they'd been sleeping together the whole last year of my marriage. And everybody in AA knew about it except me. Now, I'm over 10 years sober, and you've been telling me for 10 years there's no such thing as a justifiable resentment. Well, I got one now. And I get sick sometimes on an intuitive level. I'm one of those kind of guys, I can walk into a room of 50 people, and I will intuitively know who's going to co-sign my crap. And I'll just gravitate right to them. I'll gravitate right to the people that say things to me like, Bob, didn't you just buy her a new car? And I'll go, yes, I did. And the nail holes from the cross open up a little bigger in my hands, right? And there's a little ego justification about being right about them and feeling that smug superiority I would have done, feeling the self-righteousness of I would have never done. All those ego lies you tell yourself. But if you have the same disease of the spirit that I have, you can't stay that way. You will die. You will die. And so I had to take this process, this resentment with both of them through this part of the book to get free. And one of the first things that really hit me, it says you could almost put this in the form of a question on the bottom of page 66, the second line, the second to last full paragraph. Was I prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle? Immediately after the divorce, after finding out about it, I wasn't. But eventually, if you're like me, you get like the rat. You don't want any more cheese. You want out of the trap. If you're like me, eventually, you would rather be free than right about them. You hear what I'm saying? Eventually, you've grown spiritually enough that you'll value serenity rather than being right. Sick people who never get better would rather be right. They value being right more than they do being free or happy. But I wanted to be free. And so I was prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. So what would that be? Up to this point, I'm looking at them as in the first 3 columns, as from the point of view of a prosecuting attorney right? I got my case built against them. So if I'm going to look at it from an entirely different angle, what would I have to do? Wouldn't I have to cross the courtroom and all of a sudden sit at the defense table and start looking at the case from that table and through that perspective? And most of us don't want to do that because that means we may not be right. But I wanted to be free, so I started to do that. And it says here at the bottom of the page, after it spends the whole page telling me this stuff's going to kill me, here's what it says to do in order to be free. It says, we realized that the people who had wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Yeah, I get that. They're sick and they're stupid and they're idiots too. You know, I get that. That's not all what it says. It goes on to say, though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, that they, like ourselves, that they like me, that they're like me, we're spiritually sick, that they're like me. No. I'm smugly superior. I'm not like them. That they're like me. In other words, I have to get down off my high horse, my throne of judgment, and come right down and really realize something. To realize that if I stood in their shoes and I had all the emotions going on and all of this stuff going on inside of them that was going on inside of me that was going on inside of them, can I really get it that I would have done the exact same thing? I may not have liked myself for doing it, but can I see my humanness enough to see how, I could have been sick like that and I could have done that? Can I get that? Or do I need to be on the high horse? Do I need to still feel smugly superior? And what I started to see when I put myself in their place, I tell you, it was not a pretty picture. I am self-delusional. I would have told you up until that point all these fantasy stories about my marriage and what a great provider I was and what a great husband and how I never cheated on my wife and I bought her a new car and provided a great house for her and all this other stuff. But when I put myself in her position, what I realized is I married a girl who put her whole life into this relationship. And in no time at all, she found herself married to a guy who was trying to build a business that worked 70 plus hours a week, who sponsored a lot of guys, who was on several committees, who would come home late at night, so exhausted, most nights you just go to sleep. There's a line in the family afterwards that it really hit me one day. It says that we became emotionally inaccessible. You see, the real truth is in the areas where she needed me to be, I wasn't. I was good in all the trappings, but the real one-on-one intimacy, I got married at a couple years sober. I didn't have a clue how to do that stuff. And I'll tell you about me, I'm the kind of guy that after about 3 or 4 months, I've told you all the funny stories about my life and childhood and everything, and now I run out of things to talk about. And I can't stand the silence. So I stay busy. And I work. And I was convenient that I was in a position to take over this company, a company that I'm glad I have to this day.
I'm going to have to interrupt. We've got 4 cars across the street that ain't going to be there long. There's an Astra SD56 DHL, a Corsa SP54 ZRE, a Megan SF04 FEC, and a Suzuki SDOZ EPV. If you have plans for them for later this afternoon, you might want to go move them right now. I'm sorry, Bob.
Okay.
He asked me to just do that. And we're going to break it in a couple of minutes here. Sorry, but we needed to do that right now.
Should I finish the story or go break? All right.
Finish the story, yeah.
So what I started to realize is the desolation and the loneliness that she must have experienced. And I started to see the truth. In Alcoholics Anonymous, we talk about awakenings. An awakening means that you're going to pull your head out of your butt and see the truth. You're going to see you the way that they saw you. And when I saw myself in that marriage the way that my ex-wife saw me, I'll tell you, I was not proud of what I saw. I saw a guy who conveniently worked a lot because he didn't know what else to do. A guy who used the excuse of alcoholism, and it's a reality. I have to go to meetings. I have to sponsor all those people. That's true, but it's also very convenient for a guy who doesn't know what else to do. And I started to sense her desolation and loneliness. And when I really realized the sickness that what must have drove her to cheat on her husband, I knew that I was the guy who initiated that. Intentionally? No. My sponsor said one time, he said, "You're not guilty for anything you've ever done, drunk or sober, but you are responsible." I'm the guy who did it. When I really saw that, I thought to myself, my God, I would have easily done the same thing and probably hated myself for doing it. And you know, Karen really had a tough time. She was lucky to have stayed sober through that. When I went to her and made my amends to her, not only did I make amends for telling this victim story about involving her as the wicked witch of the East and all this crap, it was just a bunch of nonsense. Not only did I owe her amends for that and then have to go to all those people and tell them the truth, but I owed amends to her, and I had to say to her, I said, "I want you to know how sorry I am that I was just asleep in that marriage and never realized what you needed, and that I was so vacant in that marriage that it drove you to do something I know you would have never done. I know that that's not you." And I said words of that nature to her, and she started to cry. And she started to cry because I think all she ever wanted me to do was get it. All she ever wanted me to do was understand. Right? But I was too wrapped up in myself to ever see past myself to what was going on with her. See, we hurt a lot of people in our lives, not out of malice, but we're just asleep at the wheel. I just don't get what's going on. I can't see it through your eyes. I can't see past me. Then I was able to do the same thing with him, and it was really easy. And then I was finally able to come back to the last part of the step, and it says, after the prayer, and the last part says, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. A couple of lines down, it said, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. We're not looking for our part. That is, it's dangerous to think in those terms. If I'm going to look for my part, okay, I'm going to look at my part. There's another part, I'm sure. And did you notice how theirs just happens to be a little bigger? You can't look at your part without unconsciously reserving the right to think that they have a part. You know how that came to me? And I used to say that in meetings. I used to say, we look for our part. And then I took a guy through the steps, and he went to make amends to someone, and it turned badly on him. And he ended up getting it, it was just a bad deal. He got another resentment now as a result of it. And we're talking about what happened. And he went to the guy to make amends. And after clearing up his part, he's standing there waiting for the guy to deal with his part. The guy never dealt with his part, so he got pissed. Because he reserved the right to think in terms of him having a part. The book says we disregard the other person involved entirely. It doesn't matter what you've done. And if I do that, and if I'm serious about that, then I'm really looking at my life in a new light. Because what if I had to look at what kind of a son I was, and I couldn't hide behind all the bad things my parents did? What if I had to look at what kind of a son I was in its own light? What if I had the perfect parents? Then what kind of a son I was? What if I couldn't hide in the shadow of their imperfections and their wrongdoings? What if I had to actually stand up and be a man and look at what I did on its own? I'm telling you, it's a different vision. See, I'm an expert at hiding my selfish, vindictive, judgmental, bad behavior in the light of anything I could find wrong with you. I was the kind of employee, if I had a boss and I could catch him doing something wrong, it was almost like it was a license to be about lousy employee. Sometimes it was a license to steal from him. If I could find you doing enough wrong. If I was in a relationship and I caught you cheating on me once, it was like 7 get some free tickets. You know what I'm saying? I just would use anything you did wrong as an excuse to justify all kinds of selfish, self-seeking behavior. But for the first time in my life, I had to stand up and I had to look at my behavior in its own light. And I couldn't hide behind the wrongdoings of others. And when you look at it in that light, it's really different. What kind of a son am I now? Not a very good one. Was I guilty? No, I was asleep. I didn't know. And once you know, it's never the same. You know, they say the truth will set you free. It will give you a bad day or two first, though, I'm telling you. Let's take a break.
13-minute, 8-second break. Ask it, basket if you want to put a question in.